So our thoughts can be like an analogy that came to mind, the difference between using our mind effectively and kind of being, I guess, pushed and pulled around by our mind. The difference is really like a kind of like a GPS that you would use, if you're going on a road trip or something. And, generally we trust in the guidance that the GPS is giving us. But every so often, it kind of throws us for a little bit of a loop. It gives us some directions that clearly aren't, worth following. Like if you're at a dead end or there's a body of water to your left and it's saying, go left, turn left, turn left. And you're like, no, I'm not going to drive into the water. That would not be appropriate. So, our minds can really get into this kind of habitual, we can kind of get into this patterning where it's not fresh and it's not spontaneous and it's not appropriate for the needs of the moment because we're operating from a place of like some kind of habitual programming almost. And so we kind of act a bit robotic, even though life is changing all around us and things are always moving and doing something new, where it's almost like we're living in the past and trying to figure out why our decisions don't work so well or don't work as well as we would like them to, at the very least. And so our mind can be a really powerful um, servant, but it makes a really terrible master for that reason, amongst other reasons. But I find that to be kind of a big one. It's like not knowing the difference between, say, myself and the mind, or my mind, or whoever's mind it is. Just the mind in general. Because if you really don't know the difference between yourself and your mind, then it just becomes so much easier to fall into those kind of habitual patterns. Just because it's out of familiarity too, and we tend to try and find safety in what's familiar. And oftentimes, the thing that's familiar may actually be the thing that's thrusting us right into the lap of danger because it's not appropriate for the moment. And it's actually sometimes that holding on to that habitual programming, that habitual patterning that may have worked at some time in the past, but is not appropriate for the needs of this present moment. When we fall into that, sometimes that really can cause a lot more problems than it's worth, and certainly causes a lot more problems than it solves. Isn't that nice? Show the other one I'm working on too. Some monarch butterflies and a nice little golden border here. So kind of multitasking here, but just the thing about mind, I don't even know why I'm talking about it right now. It just kind of started coming to mind, and I mind started coming to mind, and I hadn't really recorded a video like this in a while, so I figured I would just see what kind of stream of consciousness wanted to come through today, because it's really, excuse me, it's really that's why I call the channel stream of consciousness, and why I call my creative website where I post my art and my stories and things, I call that Imaginavian, because it's really just about giving yourself the freedom to express whatever it is that you're feeling. And sometimes I don't want to put it on camera because putting it on camera can kind of throw me for a loop a little bit. I'll start getting into the stream of consciousness where maybe I'm kind of waxing on like I'm doing right now and just kind of spontaneously uttering, spontaneously admitting whatever it is that wants to come through. And sometimes the thought comes in like, oh wow, this is a really great message. I should record this. And getting into that thought totally throws me off my, not off balance, but it totally kind of throws me for a loop because it's like I stop myself in midstream and then I set up the camera and everything. And then I'm like, what was I talking about? And then I have to kind of recapitulate and then I have to get in this mode like I'm talking to somebody else. I have to explain these things. And sometimes it's so much easier just to express what it is that I'm feeling in terminology that I understand personally because I know what I'm going through. I'm the one here being aware of it all. I'm the one experiencing it. So, to then try and like turn on the camera and then be like, oh, wait a second, I'm gonna have to go over this because, not everyone understands these things. And so it can kind of be a little more hassle than it's worth some days. And I really just want to like get some stuff off my chest or clear some energy, clear the air. But this today is flowing very well, I feel. So I'm happy with that. And I think the big thing again, coming back to you know, being in that habitual kind of programming of your mind, it's very easy like to develop certain expectations as to how things should turn out or how you should express yourself or how life should be. And when you do that, it's really easy to kind of overlook so many other ways that you could be expressing yourself. And so you end up you think that you're helping yourself, like get ahead in life or whatever, but you start becoming very inflexible. And then it becomes counterintuitive. And then that's when you realize, oh, okay, I need to, relax a little bit. And, this is really why you can't fault yourself for trying, for doing things and failing or making mistakes or not saying the thing that you want to say as eloquently as you initially wanted to. Because the whole point of this life, it's like it's an experimentation, it's an unfolding as it goes, It's kind of like a flower that's blooming and you don't know what kind of fragrance is going to come out. But the beautiful thing about that is that inside, you don't necessarily know the shape that life is going to take. You don't know like what kind of people you're going to meet or who you're going to meet or where you're going to go or what you're going to do, but you know it's going to be good. Because you have that feeling and that feeling is like the seed of everything that's to come afterward. So you plant that seed of feeling into the soil of life and then it grows into all kinds of fruits and it's like a seed that you don't have a packaging for beforehand. You didn't get it from the nursery. You didn't go to the greenhouse and get it and it's got a nice label and you've bought it before and you know exactly when to water it and do all this stuff. It's more like it's just somebody gives you a handful of seeds and they say, trust, have faith, my friend. And you just go out, you throw them in the soil and you say, well, it feels like I should give them some water today. And you give it some water and sometimes some weeds grow and you take the weeds out. And then other times there's no weeds at all and everything's beautiful. And you become one with the soil of life. You're out there barefoot. You're out there with dirt beneath your fingers. You're getting an analogy, for getting into it. You're getting into it. You're taking it into yourself. You're merging with it. You're immersing yourself in the feelings, in the vibe of of growth. And so the fruits that come, you don't necessarily know what shape they're going to come in. You don't know if they're going to be apples or oranges. Maybe it's going to be an orange apple or a red orange or so, like in the variety of life, there's so many different ways that these things can arise. And you never quite know what it's going to be, but you know in your heart that because you got that initial message when you were given these seeds, you got that message, have faith, have trust. And so that, that percolates everything that you do. And so that in that feeling of everything being okay, everything is okay, even if, even when it's not okay conceptually, or it's not okay to your habitual programming, it's not fitting your expectation, it's still okay. Like that's the greatest thing about testing your expectations. Being tested by life is that it is the exact way that you find that how to navigate more effectively. Just like with the GPS and you know, just with the GPS, you use the GPS and you trust in the GPS, but then it starts giving you some wonky directions. Well, if it never gave you some wonky directions or never threw you for a curve, then you wouldn't exercise your powers of discernment and you wouldn't sharpen your faculties of reason. And ultimately, you wouldn't see the difference between yourself and that habitual programming. That maybe you're running a program when everything's going the way you want it to and all your expectations are being met. It's like you can become very complacent. You just get into this routine, and everything's doing, making money, and I'm getting food, and my neighbors like me, and I have a girlfriend, and whatever it is, and that's great. It's a wonderful thing. But then life comes to test you in some way. And if you're too rigid and you're too much immersed in that expectation, too identified in just that habitual pattern of life, when that inevitable test of faith comes, you're really going to get thrown for a loop. You're not going to know what to do. And, and you lament and you protest and complain. And yet there's really nothing wrong with what's happening. It's just the weather has shifted. That's effectively what's happened. The weather has shifted. You go out on the water, you set your sails, and everything's going swimmingly, and then the wind suddenly changes direction. Does that mean that you're being oppressed by the forces of life? No, it really doesn't mean that. That's really just an interpretation that you can get into because you're so maybe addicted or attached to your expectation that you know, anything that's not that expectation is abnormal or wrong or bad. And see, that's you putting um, too much energy into one way of looking at life.